All right, now I think I'm going to go on the attack a bit more. I don't think I need slides for this, right? Like, I guess the part of the problem for me is that I find the theistic hypothesis incredibly implausible for various reasons, right? It just doesn't seem on the same level as a made-up mystery naturalism hypothesis. Even that rubbish and lacking in detail though it is, still seems to be better than the theistic hypothesis, right? So let me try and explain why I think that, right? Like, first of all, the theistic hypothesis, at minimum, and the Swinburne quote you put basically said this, that there's a mind, right? There's an intellect which is behind the way things are, right? But being outside of the way things are, outside of space and time, it's a mind which isn't in time, right? But to me, that kind of, I mean, look, here's a way of thinking why that doesn't make any sense to me. I can imagine that the world doesn't exist at all, right? That I'm all that exists. My mind is just some eye of consciousness opens, has a dream, and then shuts again. Who knows? That's kind of on the cards. For all I know, I can conceive of that being the case. I don't think it's the case, right? I think there's probably good reasons to think that's not what's going on, but it's conceivable, right? And it seems to me that the theistic hypothesis is further away in conceivability than that very radical position, because what a mind is, it seems to me, from the inside, I know very well what a mind is. It's a sequence of phenomenological experiences, right? Thoughts, perceptions, feelings, right? They come in a linear sequence, right? And when I go to sleep and I don't dream about anything, there is no mind present there, right? It's gone. The mind just stops. It wakes up again, starts running again when I open my eyes and stuff starts happening, right? When the sequence begins again. So it seems to me that it's an essential property of being a mind that you are a linear sequence of things, of experiences, right? So when you're saying to me, this is how I hear it, right? Look, there are these really unlikely things that could have happened by chance, right? The gravitational blah, blah, blahs. So that means that there is an literally inconceivable hypothesis. What am I supposed to do with that? I literally cannot conceive of it. I just don't know how to, right? And so here's another one. I'll just give you one extra one, although I think there's a couple of these. What you're telling me again, right? This thing is located outside of time. But look, timeless beings, right? I've done enough metaphysics, like a Platonic object, right? The timeless entity, the number 8 or something, right? They're causally inert, right? The number 8 doesn't cause anything to happen, right? It's more than just causally inert. It's inert full stop, doesn't do anything, right? It's not just that it doesn't happen to do anything, like it's been asleep and not bothering, lazy or whatever, lazy number 8. It can't do anything, right? That's part of what it is. A non-temporal object is inert, right? That's part of the meaning of a non-temporal object. And the reason that it's part of the meaning is because doing is temporal, right? Doing is something that takes place at a time. And let's make it slightly more focused. Causation is a temporal relation, right? Effects normally happen before causes normally happen before their effects. Let's just throw in simultaneous causation for the sake of it. That's still a temporal relation, right? It's at the same time as, right? But a timeless being can't be in a temporal relation of any type to anything, even a simultaneous one. So how can a timeless agent, A, do anything, and B, cause anything? So it seems to me that that's like saying, because it's an inert being, and that being inert means you can't do anything, it's like saying a married bachelor, right? It's inconsistent, right? So it's inconceivable and it's incoherent, right? So you're saying, oh look, there's these weird coincidences, right? It's like dealing out loads of royal flushes. I couldn't have happened by chance. So it's this literally inconceivable, literally incoherent hypothesis. By that as the explanation. Yeah, any explanation is going to be better than one I can't imagine and seems inconsistent. So what do you say to that?
Okay, so within the context of the argument, obviously, if the prior probability of God is 0, then that's game over. So that's, yeah, fine. Just quickly, the problem with ND, with the disposition, it's not so much that it's mysterious for me. It's that when I try to understand what its probability is, I get the same small number that comes out of fine-tuning. So that raises the question of how strong you think this argument is that the idea of God is inconceivable and inconsistent. If you've got a proof there, inconceivable, inconsistent, yeah, I'm going to write those down. If you've got a proof there, then you're done, right? Probability 0, we all move on with our lives. If you're not totally sure, though, then you've got to start to sort of weigh up these different probabilities. So the strike against naturalism is the sort of fine-tuning strike, which I think is pretty significant. You've then got to say, okay, how strongly committed am I? You know, how strong do I think these arguments are that God is inconceivable and inconsistent? So let me say a few things about those. In terms of the mind outside of time, there's a few moves to make here. Let me make a sort of Thomistic one. Well, I haven't fully bought into Thomas Aquinas because I don't fully understand what he's going on about, but this at least made sense to me. So let me try one attack here. So Aquinas distinguishes between 3 uses of language. You probably know this, but never mind. Equivocal, unequivocal, and analogical. So if I say equivocal would be I love my wife and the score in the tennis is 1 love. The word love in those 2 sentences just happens to be the same noise, right? So those are totally equivocal. Unequivocal would be used exactly the same way. Oh, I love my son and I love my daughter. In those 2 sentences, love is being used exactly the same way. But there's another way we say in the middle of those 2 ways, as it were. If I say I love my wife and I love ice cream, I'm not saying exactly the same thing with love in both of those cases, but I'm not saying totally different things either. If you understand one, you have some way of understanding the other. I think when we call God a mind, especially if you're a Thomist and you're thinking ground of being, all of that sort of stuff, God is the principle of all reality, whatever that means. Saying that God is a mind, so it's a statement of Aquinas' view that anything we say positively about God is analogical. It's in this middle ground. The only things you can say unequivocally are negative statements. God is unlimited or something. And so there will be some analogy between our minds and what God is. And if you understand what a mind is from our perspective, you will have some understanding about what God is, but it won't necessarily be the total one-to-one unequivocal usage. Now that it might sound like a very long way to just sort of bail out on some of the things you think are essential to minds might not be properties of God. So, for example, having one thought after another in time. Well, God is, if you're trying to think of a being which created time, then at some point you've got to say, all right, our usual understanding of minds and brains and all that isn't quite going to cut it. So similarly, the category you've sort of got to create for God is that God is, in this understanding, God is a concrete, necessary being. So he's necessary in the same sense that 2 + 2 is 4 is necessary, but still got a concrete being. So God is not causally inert, but causally active. Now you say causation is temporal. There are various ways people have tried to understand that. It might just be one of the things that's not essential to causation. Or you could say with William Lane Craig that as soon as God causes something in time, God then becomes temporal, not by changing himself, but by there being some relation to time. I mean, I'm an astronomer, blowed if I know. So I think the thing to do with these, the thing to do is think harder, right? I mean, just keep thinking about them. And if you do come to the conclusion that, this God idea is inconsistent and inconceivable, then you've got to defeat it for any argument for the existence of God. Fine. All I want to say is it's got to be a proof, right? If you're just saying, probably we don't, or I can't understand how it could be the case that, then you haven't quite got a proof, and then you've got to start weighing up A versus B.
Yeah, okay, good. So it's not quite the same as saying, I mean, let's distinguish between an argument, a really terrible argument, which would just be, I don't know how to speak French, so therefore nobody speaks French, right? It's a terrible argument. You can't just go from stuff you don't know to saying that that means stuff like that doesn't happen. And that's not the argument I'm making. At least it doesn't seem to me that's the argument I'm making. Because, and the difference is that, like, I think it's got something to do with your relation to the thing. That, like, okay, so it's something like where sometimes absence of evidence is evidence of absence, and sometimes it isn't. Like that argument can be good, and it depends on your relationship to the thing. Like, should you expect to see the thing there? If you should expect to see the thing there, then it not being there is good evidence that it's not there, right? And vice versa, the other way around. So look, I should expect to be able to distinguish what we're talking about here. When I'm saying something very modest, it seems to me, about the nature of what my mind is like. I'm not saying how it comes about. I'm not saying what it's made of, or what the rules are in any deep way. I'm simply saying that, and I think you agree, I mean, please tell me if you have a different internal phenomenology, which would be great, because, you know, we could think about that. But for me, my entire life long, all the different things that have come and gone in my life, all the things that have happened, that's what my mind is. Right? I have a good understanding of what it's like. Right? It's not like, I'm probably more sure about what this aspect of what my mind is like than most of the other things that you've said. Like I said at the beginning, you could just be a figment of my imagination. All of the physics that you coughed up could be just my subconscious trying to confuse my consciousness in some kind of weird dream that I'm having. And that's more plausible than that I have misunderstood this very basic idea of what the mind is like, it seems to me. I'm pretty sure about this. And it's not quite as sure as I am that I'm existing at all. I feel even more sure about that. Right? But this idea about what the mind is like is very, very fundamental. And that leads into the analogy escape route as well. I mean, yeah, you can say, look, look, God's computational capacity is like ours, but it's also not like ours, right? I sometimes sit down and I try and work out the probability of rolling 6 6s or something, and I get there in the end, and it's really painful and slow, and I often make mistakes, right? God, when he does that, it's not quite the same as what I'm going through, you might say, but it is in some senses, right? He's still kind of like doing computation, whatever that means, but he just always gets it right, and he does it at lightning speed or something like that. Right? He's like super duper great. And so that's the analogy. I can tell you the aspect that's similar and the aspect that's different. Like that's how an analogy works. And it seems to me that what you're talking about here is you're saying, look, it's a bit like a mind, right? And so in some sense, like a mind's got desires. For one thing, he desires for there to be a life-benefiting universe. He has intentions and blah, blah, blah. He loves you, whatever. But on the other hand, the thing that's so different, right? So if we just focus in on like, well, what's God's mind like phenomenologically? Because mine is like this sequence of events that happens. Right? What's the analogy here? I know what mine's like, but he doesn't share that aspect. Is there anything you can tell me that it shares? Because if not, we're not doing an analogy. We're just doing, it's like a mind, but in no way like the experience that you have. Like the specific thing that we're talking about. It's just different. It's not an analogy. It's just a black hole of not. And that means like, if that's where it goes, and it seems to me that that is where it goes, then it's not a watertight a priori deduction that God doesn't exist. But it's pretty devastating for this as an explanatory hypothesis, right? Because when push comes to the shove, even the Aquinas analogy escape route seems to be just a big bucket that you're dropping the concept in that I'm not allowed to look into. And like I just feel like I'm not really being given any explanation here. Like I want to know, like, just basic stuff about what this hypothesis is supposed to be. And it feels to me when I lift up the lid and try and look in, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like saying, look, there's just this married bachelor at the start of the universe, right? And that's how it happens. I just don't know what you mean, right? But so this is I have such fundamental problems with this is why, to me, it doesn't really seem like it's even it doesn't get anywhere close to being an argument that persuades me that God exists or something. I mean, my problems are much deeper than with the fine-tuning argument, I suppose. Maybe they're too fundamental for this conversation, even.
Let me just say very quickly, yeah, I mean, at this point, you need to start reading a good theologian to see whether they can try to explain it better than I can. Any sort of proof is going to need to say, you said it before, you know, it is essential property of the mind that ... and then my sort of get out would be, okay, that's a property of your mind, but that's not an essential property of minds that I'm relying on. And then the response to that is, okay, is there anything left of this idea that God is a mind that I can grab a hold on, right? So the things that, in terms of the fine-tuning argument, I think the sort of the analogy that we need is simply that there are, you know, the way my mind works is, if I'm trying to design something, there's a whole heap of ways that I could put this set of Lego together, and all of those possibilities, because I want to make the thing on the box, I put together one particular possibility out of all the possibilities, and for a particular end, because it achieves something. And one of the things you can sort of try to do is to take your own mind and just try and ratchet things up a bit. You said, if I want to calculate something, I sit down, I try to work it out, and then it sort of gradually dawns on me, and then, right. So, okay, take that, and if you were thinking clearly, it would happen more quickly. And so if you think of like a perfect mind, it would just be like being in that state of realization the whole time. And is that helpful? I don't know. But yeah, so, you know, I can't claim I totally understand everything I read from theologians about God. Again, I just want to say, look, I mean, one of the ways the fine-tuning argument could work is, okay, if you're prepared to say, let's give this God hypothesis a start, let's just say, you know, maybe it might explain something. There's a lot of explanatory work it can do just because naturalism, the raw naturalism, without that hypothetical D, although with that D, as I was trying to argue, is so bad that maybe I could think of something weirder. Yeah.
Okay. Don't know, Cameron, did you want to do some questions? I mean, I can keep going. I have another objection I can bring up, but if you want to take some questions from other people or something.
Sorry, I've just been listening to the back and forth, and I just commented on the YouTube page that this is one of my favorite discussions on fine tuning I've listened to. So I've just been sitting back and enjoying it. So let me throw this out there. So I don't know if this is specific to Swinburne. I don't think it is. But he defines God, at least the personal side of it, in the sense of like he has intentions, he has beliefs, and he has powers. So that doesn't seem too different from when I reflect on my own understanding of what a mind is. That doesn't seem too far off to have thoughts and beliefs and intentions and powers. That seems pretty similar to my experience of who I am. And even back to your example of like, you know, it could just be that everything out here that I'm experiencing is an illusion. That doesn't have any bearing on this understanding of personhood, right? Because that could be the case, but I would still have intentions and beliefs and powers. So what are your thoughts on that, Alex?
I mean, I suppose you can say, oh, look, God has thoughts and beliefs and powers, and that's great. It's just that my issue is that anything more than just saying it, right? Like I can say that, look, oh, there's someone at my door. It's a married bachelor come around to see me, right? But I can say it, right? But that doesn't mean that it makes any sense. So we have to, I mean, the difficulty, it seems to me, that there's a high, well, I don't want to talk about probabilities, but I worry, right, that there are certain theological strings of words that are meaningless, right? That you can just say stuff. I mean, you're probably going to have that opinion about certain mantras in other religions, that they're not really picking stuff out that exists, right? They're stringing concepts together that don't really mean anything. And it's just, I worry that that's what's going on here when we look at this natural theology stuff, that it doesn't, it's just like, doesn't make sense. And people just try and say, oh, it's a mystery and you need to be like thinking harder and blah, blah, blah. But like, you know, you can think really hard about what a married bachelor is and never get there, because, and it might just be that I'm lacking in a severe enough devotion to the idea to really get it. Or, you know, I'm just not cognitively able. It might just be that it's nonsense, right? And there's this kind of worry, it's existential worry, that you're never really going to know one way or the other which one it is. So I'm sitting here in the shop of hypotheses looking at which one to buy, and I just don't know that it's not nonsense, right? And that's a massive turn-off for me. I don't want to buy a hypothesis that maybe explains stuff, like I said, in a kind of ad hoc way, but I'm worried that it's not really doing anything other than that. It's not just that a deeper understanding will make that go away. It might just be nonsense.
So